Thanks, everybody. So a lot of you stepped out, but I think it's an appropriate moment. The stage transition went seamlessly, very quickly. I think it's an appropriate moment to acknowledge this team back there. I'm on the headset. They're amazing. They're doing a great job. Thank you, guys. And so, I frame up real quickly why I'm doing this, and then what we all sort of discussed about how this could go. I want to say a couple years ago when ChatGPT came out, President Henry Rubio has this phrase that he uses a lot, great sports metaphor of skate to where the puck is going. And he saw that I liked AI, and he said, why don't you just play with it, see what it could do for CSA and school leaders. And I just became an AI enthusiast, evangelist, a communications director, right? And so everything I do is language. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, they're called large language models. I don't know if everyone knows that. How many people, just for our panelists, how many people use one of those regularly? Just so we know. Okay, so there are a lot of people. So if it's called a large language model, a communications director can't help but fall in love with something that takes language and turns it into other language and talks about anything regarding communications you want. So that's why I'm here, and really it's a chance for me to just ask these thought leaders questions. And so what we decided to do is we got together, I had a couple group conversations, then I talked to all of them privately, and I said, why don't I just sort of take notes and try to prompt you with the things that we talked about that I think would be most valuable for you all. And so that's kind of what we're going to do here. We also agreed that we're going to try our best to sort of maybe limit to like 2-minute answers. If we can, it'll give us more opportunity to go through things. Obviously, if someone has an idea that they want to share more about, they might take double that. But in general, I think it'll create a little bit more of a dialogue rather than separate monologues. So that's the hope here, right? Okay, so we're going to have 5 different sections, and there'll be a little transition. I'll sort of announce, what the new topic is as we go on. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce everybody. We also agreed that we want to just get into the content, and they can introduce themselves through their ideas. So what I really ask is everybody please eventually go on the app and look up all of them, please, and just see what they're doing and reach out to them and thank them for their work. So thank you guys for being here. So we're going to start with Gavin. Gavin Craig here, great last name. Welcome, Gavin. Thank you. So Gavin is an assistant principal at Torrington Intermediate School. He's also worked at the middle school. He has a background as a school psychologist, which I think might be interesting for this conversation. Also has done some Pixar designing, which is great, and is an umpire. So maybe that'll wind up in the conversation as well. So Gavin, when we talked, you described AI as a thought buddy, which I also agree with, and I love that idea. But a lot of people, when they talk about AI, they talk about how it's going to ruin thought, right? And it's going to damage critical thinking. So can you talk about reframing it as a thought partner where it augments thought rather than sort of replaces it?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Craig. And so, like I said, I'm Gavin Craig. Nice to be here in the room with everybody. As I did start off as a school psychologist, there was a lot of coming from an alternative background of education and whatnot. I was looking for ways to adapt what our current understanding of education was into something that was more fitting to the students and the staff that I saw in front of me. And so in terms of AI and being a thought partner, this is one of those things that with time and the energy that we have, it's finite. And as Mark's presentation was kind of showing before, you can use it as both a starting point and an ending point. And so when I think about it as a thought partner, I start off sometimes saying, hey, AI, can you help me start a task or something like that? And then at the end, it's more one of those that's, can you polish this up for me? Because I've already accomplished something, but I need a little help here to finish things off. It's not something that replaces me, but actually augments me in terms of my thought process and thinking.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yep. Feel free to applause for the first round here, and then maybe we can sort of move along. But this is, everybody, applause for Ken Shelton here. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So Ken is the only person up here that's not a current school leader. but he is a lifelong educator. He's got his master's in education, 20 years teaching experience. Now he teaches places like Apple and Google and Microsoft. And he's written an incredible book, The Promise and Perils of AI in Education. So we're really pleased to have him. Thank you, Ken. And so, you actually, in our conversations, and I think in most of your work, you're challenging this idea that AI is even new. And, we want to sort of reframe it not as a fad and not necessarily just a technology, but a literacy and a literacy that we're already immersed in. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and thank you, by the way. I know Mark has a book, by the way. Thank you. So I think there's a couple of things. So let's look at it in two ways. So let's start off with historical context. So artificial intelligence is a descriptor for a type of digital technologies. Many of us in this room have already had experiences with that. My earliest memory of experience with an artificial intelligence technology was when I was writing a paper in college in Microsoft Word, and Clippy popped up and said, "You forgot a comma in that sentence." Okay? That's artificial intelligence. So the whole idea around generative artificial intelligence or our large language models is that they are the next iteration of that type of technology. But this is also why I always advise school leaders, especially if you have draconian policies of like, we block all AI, I just pause and I think to myself, do I put dye in the water or not? Yes. And so what I do is I say, okay, then if you're doing that, that means that you're blocking all your spell check, your grammar checks, your email spam filters. And the whole idea around this is not being a fad is to recognize that we have been using artificial intelligence type technologies knowingly and unknowingly for all of our lives. And so then when you connect that to the fear around this and that it's just a fad, it goes into the psychology, which I bring up all the time, is in, for time's sake, but I'll just mention, I encourage you all to look it up. It's called the SCARF model, which is by Dr. David Rock. You're familiar with it, I'm sure, yes. And it's to understand that many of the defenses or responses to artificial intelligence that you are seeing, whether it be your staff, your colleagues, or anything like that, it's not really a fear of the technology itself. It goes into those 5 areas, which is status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And they're using that terminology as a mechanism to prevent or stop growth in that area.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we're going to actually welcome our next guest. This is Peter Michelson. How are you, Peter? Give him a round of applause. So welcome him here, please. So Peter is a elementary school principal, K through 3, in Torrington, Connecticut also. Something in the water in Torrington there. So he also has a background as a math coordinator. And yet, you said, when you were talking about the strength of AI in your life, it's to help you say things better, which I love the simplicity of it. So what did it unlock for you as a school leader trying to communicate and a communication partner?
Sure. So I have to say that every time I talk about AI, and we talked, maybe it was a couple weeks ago now, is something new has come to my repertoire of what I use it for. But when we were talking, and still, really the main thing that I use it for is I want my ideas to be polished up. So kind of a little scenario. Think about that email you get from the angry parent, which we all get, and you want to stand your ground. You don't want to make them angrier, so you want them to know that they're listening to you. You tell ChatGPT. I even sometimes would paste in, I usually leave names out, but paste in the email, say I want to respond to this. I want to say, no, your kid still can't, bring cigarettes to school. But don't make them angry. Make me sound professional. Make me maybe throw in a little bit of humor. Whatever it is, how I want my voice to come across. So not only does it save me time, it makes my communication more clear and more palatable to those that are out there reading it. But just today, just watching Mark's presentation, I'm going to have 2-minute videos of myself in Spanish, which I don't speak a word of, and English, and whatever other languages are in my school. And I just think about how that can not just polish up what I'm doing, but make it clear for someone that doesn't speak my language.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that. Everybody, please welcome James Allrich to the stage. How are you, James? He's the principal of Argyle Middle School, and that is a tech magnet in Maryland. He's actually the 2023 Maryland Principal of the Year, I believe. Congratulations. And he's on the board of directors of NASSP. And when we were talking, he used this great metaphor. We were talking about kids, and he said, he thinks of it as AI as an electric bike. and you got to teach kids how to ride a bike first, right? And so what does that metaphor, do you think, teaches us about introducing AI to young learners?
Great. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to say I also represent Local 146. I'm a delegate here in Montgomery County. So, you know, being a principal at Argyle Middle School, which is a tech magnet, and we're a whole school tech magnet. In essence, that means any kid who walks in our building participates within our magnet. So we've been talking a lot about creating an AI track, right? An AI pathway for our students. And what we realized really, really quickly is that AI is everywhere. So instead of thinking about an AI pathway, we really started having more conversation about how do we add or amplify the AI that already exists in the pathways that we currently have, right? Digital media, cybersecurity, things of that nature. And the way we try to think about it is that it's like an electric bike, right? We want you to be able to first know how to ride a bike, right? Strengthen those legs so you can actually ride the bike. Once you know how to ride that bike, you're like, oh, get on that electric bike, you can actually go farther. But you're still in control of which way that bike should go. So often we'll get caught up in the idea that AI is going to replace reading, writing, and things of that nature. We say no to that, right? We say we want to make sure that you know how to use that bike, how to direct that bike, and also how to just say, you know what, I actually don't need a bike for this particular ride. I actually can walk, or I actually can do something else, like jump on a plane, or whatever the case may be. But the idea is that it is a tool, and you use that tool to your benefit to do the things that you need to do.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. And I don't have to introduce Mark, obviously. Amazing presentation. So me and my wife actually saw David Blaine a couple days ago, and he's got nothing on you. Bring it to Vegas. So when Mark and I talked, he had this great line, which is a little bit different than all of the technology, which he said that AI can be used to give school leaders human interactions, which I thought was really interesting and sort of, you know, counterintuitive. So what do you see as the most human part of your job that AI will actually protect?
Yeah, I want to preface what I want to say by first acknowledging how hard many of our unions had to work to negotiate workload reductions. And while that's not true across the board, because it's a very difficult thing to accomplish in certain cases, we didn't get hired for our ability to sit behind a desk and work at a computer. I like to think that that wasn't the reason why I got the job. And having had the opportunity to just mingle with everybody, man, there is nothing like educators, but man, there's nothing like school leaders. The enigmas and the personalities and just the richness of the human being, the element of what you bring to your schools, it's just been so rich these past couple of days. So very simply, AI has allowed me, and that was kind of the point of the first third of my presentation, was to make the point, like, let's get the work out of the way. Let's get as much of that off of our plate as possible so we can get around our buildings, interacting with students, faculty, and staff, because that is where the magic and the work really is, not behind the desk, not behind the screen. I recall 8 years ago, Principal Lamb is kind of famous for this now, that desk that he rolls around his building with. He's on social media. Started doing that 8 years ago with my laptop. And now I kind of mingle the AI with interacting with students, and my mobile office is kind of all over the place with me. I don't just stay stagnant. But that's been the greatest give back to me, is my time, so I can interact with folks. Because ultimately, your net worth is connected to your network, right? And we need to make sure our networks are very strong and rich in our school communities.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. So we're going to transition to the next topic, and this is actually the moment I'll talk longest, because I think I have an idea for a transition that kind of ties a lot of stuff together. You know, I grew up similar to how John Gordon was talking, where my dad just had a sort of cynical New Yorker approach to life, and he was a Vietnam vet. And, you know, whether it's nature or nurture, I find myself with that voice of, you know, doubt sometimes when I'm working on a new idea. And at some point, I realized, you know, if I'm talking to this chatbot and you can customize instructions, maybe I should customize that the language I talk about helps me sort of accomplish some sort of goal, right? And what I realize is I'm someone who just sits there kind of brainstorming a lot of times, and I don't always necessarily put it into action right away, right? And so I just made a simple prompt, and I said, hey, as we're talking, can you, at the end of everything we say, can you suggest an action I could take that's actually taking us out of this brainstorm and like do something about it? And the reason I'm bringing that up is the theme of the conference is words into action. And if you can sort of use a large language model that is an infinite training on words to actually put things into action, I think you could all see how that would just help the theme of this conference, let alone everything else we're talking about. And the other reason I wanted to bring it up was John Gordon, he's got this mindset. And so last night I asked ChatGPT, John Gordon, of course, does. And then I asked, tell me about what his work says and what's his book, The Power of Positive Leadership. Let's give it another plug. And I said, can you give me like the five highest leverage prompts that would help me start to think like John Gordon? Just as an example, give me 3 ways to recognize and celebrate my team today. Help me tell a story of change I'm leading, why we're doing it, and why it matters what's possible. Design a 30-minute meeting that builds trust, energy, and alignment. Help me refrain a tough message with honesty, empathy, forward look, right? So, the reason I'm bringing it up now is there might be some people in the audience that sort of say to themselves, okay, well, this is a man who has intellectual property, right? And this is using his writing. And I'm sort of taking advantage of it in this interesting way, but is this complicated, right? And that's why our next section is about ethics and about equity. And I think that for me, what I say is, I think John Gordon wants his message out there. Like, I think he would love this. I think all the stuff that it's trained on is his promotional materials to try to get the idea out there, right? And it's immensely valuable for me. Does that make sense? So why we're transitioning here? So we're going to go to Ken first. Ken, in all the conversations, you use the term tequity. So can you describe a little bit about what ethical AI integration looks like, especially in districts that maybe have unequal tech access?
Yes. So that's the reason why the subtitle of the book I co-authored with my brother from another mother, D. Lanier, says Ethics and Equity have entered the chat. So I think for all of us in this room, we have to consider all the following. So let me start off with ethics. Ethics is not a set of rules. It's a mindset. It's a culture. It's an action. And we have to understand that there are ethical implications to really everything we do, but they're even more magnified when it comes to artificial intelligence technologies. I use the word tequity. I've used that for a long time in many of my keynotes, and I'll share with you how I define it. So I define tequity as merging the effective use of educational technology with culturally responsive and culturally relevant learning environments to support students' development of essential skills and higher order thinking. And the whole idea around technology and equity is there's 4 areas I always talk about with respect to the digital divide. There's the access divide, there's the accessibility divide, there's the academic divide, and then there's the agency divide. And you're seeing some of that now when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I would even ask you all in this room, if you were to estimate the top 2 reasons or top 2 use cases of educators in the buildings or the schools that you lead, how are they using it? My guess, and usually I'm right, is worksheet generation and lesson plan generation. And so if you understand how bias is baked into these systems, you can recognize, and there's research that backs this, by the way, so this is not just Ken's opinion, is that if we cognitively offload what we are capable of doing, that's why I love a lot of what Mark shared in his keynote, you actually increase the potential for the equity divide. There are ways in which we can utilize these technologies to provide more access, to engage in higher order thinking and more academic rigorous learning opportunities for our students, to support our students just as you all, as many of you shared, as a thought partner for voice. Oftentimes when I work directly with students, I'm like, do you know what to say? I'm not sure. That's where I would use it to say, okay, how can it help give you some language? But ultimately, to kind of finish my comment here, is that we really have to give care, consideration, time, space, and grace to have the ethical conversation. And within that, it must include, and I have to stress this vehemently, it must include how you actually define academic integrity.
Thank you. And Peter, as I said before, Peter's K through 3, right? And so when you're approaching AI with the youngest learners, how do you sort of teach them some of this moral development, cognitive development, and yet not outsource creative thinking and critical thinking, which we're all so frightened by, right?
Sure. So I think there's a few different ways to approach that. I think The biggest is where you're having teachers using the AI to create lessons that will do just that. So thinking about what we really want our kids to be doing in the classroom, it's not, I mean, better worksheets are great, but no worksheets are better. To have kids in there talking to each other. We have vertical whiteboards in our classroom now. Peter Lillidahl's pushing for his work, which has been fantastic. So it gets kids in small groups up there. Only one kid has a marker. So AI is not involved in that from the student perspective at all. But what might be is creating the problems that the kids are going to be thinking about. Putting assignments in front of kids that are AI proof. So they can't go home, type it into AI, and out comes the answer. Then teaching them those critical skills. I think about, again, since we talked with Elon and his AI, I forget what it's called, gunk or something like that, but it was shown to be anti-Semitic, and things that were coming out of it were anti-Semitic. Our kids need to know, starting in kindergarten, if they're using AI to write things, they need to be looking it over. They need to make sure that the voice that's coming across is the voice that they want representing them. And I think that those are some of the ways that you can start making sure that your kids understand the ethics around this. But I think back also to when I was a kid, and the fact that you could have a calculator was kind of a new thing that, we had one at home, but it was expensive. And teachers were worried about, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket for the rest of your life. They're right, I have two, and I got one on my wrist, and here they are. But we don't have calculators in front of our kindergartners and our first graders until they know how to add, subtract, multiply. So those are a similar connection that I would make.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to actually jump to Mark. And obviously, a lot of this section is the concerns, the fears, right? So that we can sort of surface them a little bit and then go to the more, positive, hopeful ideas and the promise of this stuff. But Mark, you talk about divides that Ken mentioned, right? Where do you see, with all your work of it, where do you see that divide widening?
Well, the more and more apps I play around with, and the further I go down the AI rabbit hole, you've all downloaded an app where you eventually figure out and realize there are in-app purchases you have to make to really get the full power of the app. And even the ChatGPT that I use today, the free version with that bell schedule, it would have done a crummy job of it. You pay the $20 a month, that's the version of it that gives me what I exactly want. For $200 a month, because those are the 3 price points right now, I could make any one of you a video of you, upload it, and make it say or do. You ever see those creative, somewhat funny videos of different political leaders sparring, like in a video game? That's the $200 version of ChatGPT or something like that. So I'm concerned that our students, we have 52% of our students are eligible for free lunch, as the old term would go. They're not going to be able to afford some of these newer technologies that are going to be tier-based. So the pay-to-play model is one concern. And in New York, we're about to ban cell phones, which there's part of me that's happy about the social aspect that's going to benefit from that. Really disappointed that no effort was put forth to actually try and correct the issue, because we're going more mobile than ever. And we're about to just rip this out of 1,400 kids who are clearly addicted to the device itself. That's never worked in most models, although we do hear it is sort of working. But to Ken's point, and I thought I chose to bring Ken's book to the stage because after reading it, and going through it the second time now, I understand where Ken's coming from and share a similar concern with reciprocating and reperpetrating a bias that continually just gets reperpetrated in our school systems and throughout history. Using systems like large learning models such as ChatGPT and so forth, we're moving into a space where districts and central offices are going to start using these technologies to do a lot of the digital lift that we used to do manually, identify and flagging students. And there's a lot of strong evidence to put forward that the artificial intelligent bots may not get it right, and they may just reperpetrate biases that have been long sought after to get rid of and erode and eradicate from our school system. So I really do strongly recommend giving Ken's book a read. It changed my perspective and escalated my concern as we're getting ready to hand off some of the mundane tasks that we don't look forward to doing.
That's great, thank you. And Gavin, we talked a little bit about bias and limited perspectives, right? And so the positive question is, so how do we ensure that diverse backgrounds are actually reflected and respected in what we're doing with AI?
Yeah, so I think it speaks to a lot of what we've already said to a degree. And I was listening to one of Ken's podcasts not too long ago about how this idea of bias is something that you continue to have struggles with. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. In terms of the AI perspective of bias, I think one of the things that I want to make sure of is that we don't take what we have put into the AI as fact, gospel, that component. And I think that's to the degree of what Ken was speaking to in terms of the tequity perspective. You want to make sure that what you get out of it, if it's garbage in, it will give you garbage out. AI wants to please you, wants to do the right thing, wants to continue to have you come back and ask more questions. It's how we built the entire model. And so I think one of those things that you have to keep in perspective is that if you are asking questions and you are fearful that there is a blind spot in your repertoire of information, make sure that you are providing more to the model first before trying to get an output from it.
I want to do a quick social experiment with the crowd.
Absolutely, go for it.
Here's an example that connects to this, and this is why I love what Mark shared, and this is precisely why I encourage you all. When we deny access to ourselves or our students, we lack the opportunity to learn valuable digital skills. So we're going to try two things real quick. So here's one. Here's a prompt. I'm going to ask you all what you think, and then feel free to take this and try it. If I were to put in an LLM, generate a 100-word short story about a gifted American student helping a struggling student learn English, who do you think the students are going to be most likely? Okay, and I can tell you right now, I do it all the time, and I want you all to try it. More than 90% of the time I've done it, the names of the students, the student who's struggling tends to have a ethnic-sounding name. Then another one I've done with a school system that wanted to have an AI tutor. I said, okay, bet you I can break it in less than 1 minute. And they're like, what? So I went in and I put in a profile of I'm a student in AP English and I need help with a writing passage. And so I typed in a paragraph, put it in, and it gave me some recommendations. They were at my Lexile level or higher. I then created a profile. I said, I'm a student, but English is not my first language. I copied and pasted that exact same writing sample, and it gave me recommendations that were lower than my Lexile level. So this is why we have to do, this is where I love what Mark shared. You gotta play, you gotta break it, you gotta try all of these things because it can help frame the questions that we ask and how we scrutinize many of the platforms that we use.
Thank you. Can we just let you get James in for a second? I just want to ask you, because you had this line of the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? Meaning kids are already using it, right? And we're talking about ethics and transparency. So how do you sort of address that while we're kind of flying the plane?
Yeah, when I think about the toothpaste is out the tube, I mean, it's being used. Whether or not we ban cell phones, which we just banned cell phones in our district for middle school and lower. And what I try to do is really work with our teachers and think about all these opportunities that we have. So I had a situation where a student came to me and said, hey, Mr. Allrich, this teacher said I used ChatGPT to do this particular assignment. And I said, did you? The student said no. I go and talk with the teacher, and the teacher shares with me and said, hey, I know this kid, right? And this is not their writing. So one of the first points that was super important is that, the best AI detector, it's a great relationship. It means you got to know your kids. You got to know the people in front. You got to know the students that are in front of you. And what I saw really quickly is that when I actually got a chance to talk with the teacher, we needed to have a different kind of conversation, which is not so much that the kid used ChatGPT, but that this was not this kid's writing. Right? So we had to sit down. We did a restorative circle, not necessarily a restorative assessment, but a restorative circle, which then led to a restorative assessment that had an opportunity for the kid to share the kind of help that he actually received, which in essence was not his writing. He didn't necessarily use ChatGPT, but it was an opportunity. So these opportunities to teach our students around AI literacy around the ethics and things of that nature is oftentimes going to be in the hands of our teachers who are going to be engaging this up front. Then puts it in our hands as school leaders who are going to be engaging teachers about how to handle this. So to go straight to no cell phones or a 0 because a kid used ChatGPT or what other AI tool is problematic, because now we've lost the opportunity to actually teach this AI ethics, to teach this AI literacy that is so important that our kids have to learn.
Correct.
They have to learn it, and they won't learn it if we just say, oh, you used it, you got a 0, and that's it. We actually have to teach them how to actually use it appropriately so their voice can actually stand out and do the work that they need to do.
Thanks so much. And so that section's over, and it's raising a lot of worries and concerns. And the reason we all wanted to surface it is it's real. It's real, and you all are in charge of those concerns. Your students are going to have concerns. Your teachers, your family, and they're legit, right? But we can't sit it out. And I think that's what we all sort of agree. The answer is not resist it and sit it out. The answer is how do we sort of transform those concerns and take our whole school community from those concerns, point A, and bring them where you want them to around AI, point B. And this metaphor came up in the workshop we were doing yesterday of a torchbearer, and I'll give a speaker named Nancy Duarte credit for that, where she talks about leadership as a torchbearer. And this is a great metaphor of, you're in the dark, you're in the woods, and someone grabbed a torch, right? And they could see where they wanted to go, and everyone's like, there's no path, right? But they forged the path, and they're like, follow me, I've got the torch. And that's what these men are torchbearers, and you all are as well. So let's take those concerns and sort of transform them into like, what do we want to do? And that's why this next section is practical applications, and looking forward to. We'll start with Mark, because you just gave a whole presentation. Is there a surprising tool that your whole school has adopted, or a large part of your school?
Yes. So the equivalent to this in college, you probably heard the story. Some students, when they're taking a final or an exam over Zoom, they have to keep their camera on so the professor could watch them taking the assessment. Or during the advanced placement exams during the pandemic, the camera had to be on while students were taking the assessment on their devices. So flash forward, if authenticity is a great concern of ours, which it is, with artificial intelligence, the platform that has just got me wild, and we infused it into our 9th grade literacy writing curriculum, Khan Academy's Khanmigo. Khanmigo is a chatbot Sal Khan created, and particularly the writing coach and the literacy coach, the reading coach. The writing coach is the one I'm just enamored by. Essentially what it does, imagine you give your students a writing prompt. It could be a paper or an essay, and the entire process is DVR'd while the student's typing in the platform. But even better, the chatbots are really darn good at giving good advice on the whole writing process when the student is not supporting their argument well enough, or there's typos and it could be worded better. I'm impressed by that, but more so, anytime, and this is what is really the cincher for why this particular software is very, very much adored by the teachers. If a student tries to take language or words or text or a paragraph from somebody else and put it in there, the chatbot automatically knows, well, you didn't write that. That's not even close to your style, because it gets to know its style, and it alerts the teacher immediately during the class. The whole process, and this is why I love it, the process is DVR, digital video recorded. So the teacher's heads-up display shows what every student is doing, how well they're doing it, if they're being authentic or not. And that gives, which is part of my other mantra, time back to the teacher to work with the students who really need it, while those who are excelling could move forward. And of course, my prediction is, wow, like the only thing this is missing is the in-app purchase, which is probably going to come soon, that will actually grade it for the teacher. It does a wonderful job guiding the student through the process and capturing the process. And it's one of the only things I've seen that truly lifts authenticity to the very top of the product lines.
Thank you. Thanks. Gavin, can you talk about one case of AI that you feel like has really transformed your personal workflow? But also, if you can give us any attempts of an AI that actually failed and you decided not to use AI for those purposes.
Yeah. So one of the biggest tasks I've had for the last like 6 years has been to do scheduling for the 1,200 to 1,100 students in a middle school. And the most recent schedule we tried to do was a rotating schedule with 7 days, dropping one with 3 lunch waves, some minutes in the morning, some minutes in the afternoon, transition time staggered, making sure that everybody stays on teams and whatnot. And so AI sometimes has been helpful to get me into a space where I can take something and plug it into your scheduling platform or PowerSchool or whatever. The challenge in that is that a lot of times I've found we've had to do, it was almost an exercise in technical writing. Whereas how specific can I make the prompt? How many different layers can I make it to? But what that does is that gives me a basis or a framework that normally would have taken me days to set up and make sure that all the calculations were correct and boil it down into a couple of minutes. I think the one thing that did fail in some ways was the idea that trying to give prompts that would provide feedback to those angry emails and whatnot. And I think sometimes that actually will either be too kind or too generous or too comedic. And so just trying to make sure that you peel that back when you need to, review that a little bit before you hit that send button.
Thanks. James, observation and evaluations, right? So how can AI streamline our work and yet still keep relationships at the center of that? You were talking about that earlier.
Yep. So evaluations and observations, I know we've all been there. In our particular district, we use what we call CIJ paragraphs. Very detailed, everything is scripted, no checkboxes, anything like that. So I found a way to simply use ChatGPT, and after I've scribed, after being in the observation for at least half an hour, drop it in there, put the claims in and all the other stuff. So able to do that. But the reality is this. It gives me so much time back to actually have the real conversations with the teacher. Because what I found is that the real feedback is not that document that I give them. That's the CYA, that's the document you have to submit. But that's not the real feedback. The real feedback is when I actually get a chance to actually talk with the teacher about what the missed opportunities were. Where were some chances to actually scaffold here? What did you say that might have turned this particular student off? I didn't have that time before because I was spending so much time writing. Now, I can get that report pushed out very, very quickly. So I can actually spend most of my time in that particular space. Another thing that I've done in my particular building is once I started getting really comfortable with ChatGPT and these AI spaces, I taught my admin secretary how to use it. She was struggling to do all the writing. She does way more writing than I do. Right? She's writing lots of letters before I actually even see them. I taught her how to use that. And because of that, it makes her life a lot easier. So we're having a conversation. She knows my voice, and my voice is probably in her ChatGPT space. So that way, when she's writing that letter on my behalf, she knows exactly what to do. But it's saving her time. We're able to have very clear conversation about what it is that I need, and then she's able to put it together.
Thank you. Peter, so when you're using AI tools for another world of like report card, comment generators, lesson planners, all that, how do you avoid, because I think a lot of people have this fear, how do you avoid losing like a personal human voice there?
Yeah, well, I learned more about that today, thanks to Mark, especially with the teacher evaluation feedback. Just thinking about that, I think it was a four-topic rubric or something for the teachers to have, which if you think about the number of educators that you give feedback to, there's no way you're going to do that without some help. But to have ChatGPT help me along with that, put it in, say this is the teachers, this is how they want their feedback, this is the feedback I want to give them. So I noticed, I always do that too, I noticed in their relationships with kids were really strong, and as I put my script in there from what I scripted their lesson, I wanted to look for these kind of things. And then perhaps they strayed from the topic, and can we pull them back to a learning target or whatever we're calling it that day. So I would put that in, and I would encourage teachers to do the same kind of thing. So this student, and especially I'm thinking for older students where they have a little bit more personality, where they're maybe the one reading the comments, but also do that kind of thing with your students so that they know that you are considering their thoughts as part of the process, how they like feedback. And with the little ones, you'll probably develop that on your own. But thinking about the small little comments that some teachers give and the narratives that are pages long that some give, to really help to put those to that Goldilocks length in there, that kind of thing. But to make sure that they are telling ChatGPT, telling whatever resource they're using, that this is the feedback I want to give to these parents or these kids.
So Ken, a lot of people are probably sitting out there saying, okay, all these practical applications, they sound great, there's so many of them. Can you give a little sense of what criteria do you offer people should use when they're evaluating a new tool they've heard of and whether or not it's going to help their community?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, as we heard me mention earlier. So one of the statements I always make, and it's actually even in the book, is automating ineffective practices will not shift outcomes. And we have to be mindful of that because some of the biggest marketing points for many of the AI and education platforms are also our biggest pain points. You'll probably be seeing a through line up here, time, okay? So that's number one. But the main thing I encourage anybody across all roles, scopes, and responsibilities in education is to keep in mind the following: efficiency and efficacy. Which is more important, or can I strike a balance between both? You all have heard several examples up here of that balance. Do I know my educators? What kind of feedback do I want to give them? Now, how does it help me do that more efficiently? I am not sacrificing efficacy by offloading the inhumane or the impersonal part into the platform. I'll even give you all another example because I think you had mentioned AI proof. It's a question, and I would encourage you all to ask all your staff, how well do you know your learners? Tell me about one of them. Because that's where it starts. And I'm going to try to keep this to one. I'm going to give you all a specific practical example. I work with an ELA department at a high school. And I said, my provocation to you all is the following. First of all, here's my thoughtful provocation. Does AI make learning more fair or unfair systems more efficient? Start off with that. Next, how well do you know your learners? Now, what happens if I tell you you have to dismantle the 5-paragraph summary for a book? So I'm going to give you all a quick example. The students had read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Yeah. And I said, I love that book. My dad forced me to read it when I was younger. But may he rest in power. I'm glad he did. But the point being is, I know the book. And I said, so we're going to, what tool and what mechanism allows you to hear the voice and get into the consciousness and the learning of every single one of your learners more efficiently, but not sacrificing efficacy? A chatbot can do that. Now, what do you want the chatbot to do and what do you want it not to do? We don't want it to write their essays for them, so we need to put that in the prompt. But then some of the discussion of the chatbot was around things like, how does your understanding of being invisible in different social settings connect to the protagonist in the book? And the whole idea was to draw a direct synthesized correlation between your understanding of the book and your lived experience, which, by the way, the more that you bring in learners' reality, AI cannot do that. But obviously it helped because I even said, I'm sure you have some students in class that don't want to raise their hand in front of their peers for a variety of reasons. Does that mean they don't have something of value to offer for their learning and or overall class discussion? So those are some of that goes into the ethics, that goes into equity, and that also goes into a practical application.
Great for us. Thank you so much. So we're going to go to our last section now, which is, looking forward, skate to where the puck is going, as they say, and we're going to try to end on a little bit of an inspiring note that hopefully you'll go out and you'll start using tools if you don't use them, talk to each other about it. Obviously, our panel's here. And so I just want to ask some questions about what's ahead, and then we're going to open it up to any questions you all have. So in terms of what's ahead, let's start with Peter. So if a principal, assistant principal out here, any administrator wants to take one small, high-value step tomorrow, what would you suggest and why?
I would, depending on your systems, I think I would start with looking at data. I think when we cannot take the personal piece out of looking at student data, that's really important too, because again, like Ken's saying, you have to know your students. But to look at the big picture of data, put it into a chat GPT, whichever engine you want to use, and tell it what kind of information you want. I want to have a discussion with first grade, and I want to talk about phonemic awareness, whatever it is. Give me some points back from this data. But I think that's a biggest time saver that can also take out some biases as well. So we all know that as much as we want to keep all our kids on the same plane, treat them all the same way, you see their name and you may think that they can't do as much or they can do more, but the computer doesn't think that way. So look at data.
Thank you. James, I keep hearing when you talk, you're talking about building relationships, right? As we all know, that is leadership. And so can you talk about how AI can serve to build relationships?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many ways I think the AI helps, because what it does is it saves you time. The question is, what are you saving time to do what with? And my point is to build relationships. So one example that I remember, we had an incident in the middle of a classroom where the students got into a physical altercation. And what we try to do in that building, because we're a restorative justice school, is we try to reset that classroom as soon as possible. So that incident happens, those two kids are removed. I'm on my way down to that classroom, and I'm thinking about what questions am I going to ask in that actual circle. So I'm on my device asking ChatGPT, what are the questions that I can ask to reset this classroom after an altercation? By the time I get down there, I have 10 questions to ask, but I still have to choose the questions. I still have to facilitate that circle. I still have to deal with the trauma that the kids have to deal with. None of the AI is going to deal with that. So that is the piece that I think the AI provides, because before it was me having to go pull up a book, try to figure out. That circle was going to happen a week later, 3 or 4 days later. Those students were impacted and all the other things were happening. But now I can do that immediately. Not just me, but I'm also teaching my team to do the exact same thing. So we can actually use that time more effectively to do just that, build relationships, because we know that this is all about the young people and the people that we work with.
Thank you. Gavin, so give them one immediate way that they can immediately reduce workload, but yet at the same time, they're not going to sacrifice student engagement or teacher voice.
So I was going to originally answer it one way, but I think in keeping with the theme, I think this is where the social aspect of our jobs, our lives, our careers really comes into play. If the task is not inherently social in the sense that it brings me in front of someone else or brings people in front of me and we're having that interaction, I do think that it's worthy of something that you can use AI as that time skip ahead, a piece of whether it be an email, a letter of recommendation, a summary of performance that you need, that you can give prompts to, because the more time that I spend in front of someone else in a social way, that's that value to me in terms of what we offer as leaders, is to actually be face-to-face with others, not in front of the TV screen, as Mark was saying earlier.
Thank you. Mark, when we talked, you had a great distinction about process-based learning. Can you just explain that idea?
So literally, once again, just shifting, I like the metaphor of moving the carrot to the middle. You're changing where the incentivization is for the student. Because more often than not, our design of assessment is the flaw in our execution of the instruction. And it's kind of nice to see, at least in New York, finally, with the portrait of a graduate work that is being built out, and it's going to be a part of our language soon, and they're going to be sunsetting the requirement of Regents exams. I feel finally compelled to get my teachers who are holding on to the flagpole of those assessments that are very standardized based in their formatting, to embrace things that are more messy. We need to make learning messier and acknowledge that it's supposed to be messy. And I think less with more. Don't give 6 papers, give 3, and spend more time interacting. And for process, I tell my teachers flat out, I am using artificial intelligence to write your letter of recommendation so I can have more time in my life, with my wife, my kid, with you in school. So let's do the same in the actual classroom so you can have more time with the kids. So really now it's just about teasing out how we acknowledge, hey teacher, I just used AI, this is why I used it, this is how I used it, so I can do something else more effectively and importantly.
Great. And I think this is a great question to end on for the panel here, and then we're going to open it up with a microphone there. But so much of what everyone's talking about is about shifting mindset, right? And trying to take yourself from these fears and concerns and sort of adopt as positive a mindset, going back to John Gordon, as positive a mindset about where this is going to take us in the future as we can. So what do you think is a positive mindset shift that everyone here, every school leader in the country could adopt tomorrow?
I mean, you're hearing the through line up here. I think number one, keep the human centered in the loop, no matter what. We will not be replaced by AI, nor should we be replaced by AI. Education is relational, not transactional. And I think the more we affirm and reassert that disposition that we all in this room know, then we can really start to look at how we use digital technologies like artificial intelligence in more human and meaningful capacity. But part of it starts off with affirming each other that no, not only can a technology not do what we should do, but it shouldn't. It can help us do, as you all are hearing. There are ways, but keep the human centered in the loop no matter what.
That's great. Thank you. So this is a great moment to open up to questions. We just want an opportunity. I know it's a lot of sort of abstract thinking, and some people might have questions. We have a microphone if anyone wants to sort of raise their hand. I think Sophie will run around. Is there anyone out there?
Yep.
Got a couple people there. We got someone here. Wherever the microphone lands, that's where it lands today. We'll see what happens.
All right, I wasn't expecting to go first. I'm just wondering in the higher ed world how this looks. I have a daughter who just went to university, to college, and it's very different there.
Yes, it is.
It seems that it's like a big no-no. We don't AI anything. And then we do an online test where if your eyes move from the screen for a split second, you get dinged and you're cheating. So it seems to be very no-no and cheating in the university world. And so I just worry in the K-12 system if we're, like I'm all about AI, so if we're building this in the K-12 world and then they're going to this next step where it's no-no and it's cheating, like what then? So more about maybe the university world.
Anybody want to jump in?
I would love to.
Ken, go ahead.
Okay,
And
so.
Ken, you look really excited about this.
Yes. All right, I'm going to be quick because I'm not the only one here. Okay, so start off with the following. Is that surveillance and control or consent and support? Yeah, okay. Because I have this conversation with higher ed, and one of the things I do, and I'm going to directly address your question too, is I even ask, how do you define cheating? You see, I don't use that word, y'all. I don't use that word. I always say is, students need to be guided and led in ways that they don't engage in actions that can compromise or be detrimental to their learning. Because the whole idea is that there's this belief that, oh, AI, now kids are cheating. That has not changed. And so part of it for us, with higher ed, trust me, I'll just put it to you this way. For us in K-12, I think one of the main things is, you're seeing it, and this is why I love what you all have heard here. There's an acknowledgement that it's helpful. There's a transparency on how you're using it. I think that there's a degree of what I describe as academic gatekeeping in higher ed because you have too many college professors that refuse to interrogate and examine their antiquated pedagogy. That's what's really going on. Thank you.
Mark had something he wanted to throw in as well.
So I wish
we'll
I
move
had
to the
left
next
this
question. Go ahead, Mark.
slide. I wish I had left this slide on my presentation, but I need to keep it to 45 minutes. But I acknowledge, so Moses Ojeda, another incredible high school principal in New York, Thomas Edison and I were invited to ChatGPT's Ed Forum at the grand opening of their OpenAI's New York headquarters. And the only people that were invited there were higher ed provosts and college presidents. And Moses and I were the only two high school principals in New York invited because we've been tasked with helping the New York City public school system get chatgpt.edu, which is the higher ed version of ChatGPT, which would be more school-centrically infused into your learning management systems and things of that nature. But what I saw was very different. I saw college provosts and presidents right in bed and very comfortable with OpenAI, ChatGPT. I think they realize, because it is a business, the world of higher academia, they can't expel everybody, and they're acknowledging that they want to make money. So they have to figure out, and this is to be non-comical, it is part of a process that we as the educators sometimes haven't fully embraced yet. I've had to turn around a supposed principal suspension at times, because sometimes I feel like we didn't do enough to impart on the student that they just used it the wrong way. They didn't intend to, and maybe we're not modeling the correct behavior too well. But I saw a very different thing that day, and it wasn't all the whining and the dining. It was an evening. Moses and I had black and blues in our rib cages because we were sitting up front, and we couldn't get over what we were watching. It was complete opposite of what I expected. So there will be an embracing and a shift at higher academia to what this is going to look like. They have no choice.
So unfortunately, I think we probably have time for one more. But what I want to say is that there's this app, and obviously you all have been using it, and everyone here loves this topic so much. You can already see they're answering questions. So go there and ask a question, and I think they'll answer it. And it helps all of us too, because we get to know more about what the audience is thinking while we're talking here about it. So we have one more question here for time, and then I don't know where. Yeah, you got it.
So first, I have to publicly thank Mark. I was at your CSA version of this last year, and I have since planned 3 vacations, done several observations using ChatGPT. So thank you. I really, and wow, what a step up. This was primo. Okay. Next, so excited to see you all, but I count 5 men, 1 moderator. I was wondering when it was going to come up.
I figured.
Right?
I knew it was coming.
So, look, all the women. I really, that was a little bit of an indictment, but really the question is, right, how do we as sort of the educators in the building and a system, right, there are really good reasons why there are only men up there. You're not the only ones using AI, but you are who sort of get tapped for this, right? Women leave technology at something like 60%, some crazy number, once they enter. And so what are we doing at the K-2 level and the mid-level and the high school level to ensure that women in technology and that these biases, right, that are almost unavoidable if everyone isn't in the room, are avoided?
Can I just go real quick?
I can talk to you.
And before Gavin wants to offer an answer, I think I have a solution right away, which is who here, a woman, who here would like to do this with us? Like who here would want to step up and be an AI thought partner with us? And then next time we do it, we'll have 5 and 5, and it'll be a little bit more diverse. So if you are someone out here that is using it and loves it and wants to join, then please reach out to me, Craig at CSA-NYC.org, and whatever level you're at, we'll start to talk about joining and having more diversity in the conversation. And I want to give Erminia a chance to answer something. What's that? Yes. Let me put out. Yeah. Let me also offer, which is very very often true. Erminia planned this entire panel, and Erminia scheduled all of this together. Like it was her vision. It was her vision, and obviously she never takes the credit. But I think that's behind the scenes. She obviously orchestrated it all, right? So I think that's a great question. Thank you for raising that. And go ahead.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Erminia was right. It was building the whole thing behind the scenes. Behind every great man is a great woman. I've got my wife back here in the back here right now today. So one of the things I think to build on what you were kind of saying is how do we make it so that there's equity in who gets tapped even, who gets the opportunities. So I will say for my daughter, who's actually in a different school district than where I work, she has an hour of code every week. She has opportunities to build in time with technology every single day into her day. And I think that the more that we continue to kind of push this platform, that it's a platform for all students, that it's not just for the techie, geeky kid in the room, and that it's something that we continue to value as deeply as we value reading. We need to have a digital literacy just to the same degree as actual literacy.
Great. And that's a great question to end on because it is so important. I think we've all thought about that as well. So I appreciate you voicing it and surfacing it. I think that's all the time we have. So please.
No, I feel like there's another answer.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I had some.
Go.
No, I have a lot to say on the topic. I mean, we are middle school. We're a tech magnet, so we're super focused on our ladies, our girls. We are struggling just to get them in the door, right? Because it is a choice magnet, which means students, again, do not test to come to us. They choose to come to us, right? So we're 60-40, and we're doing so much to actually get our girls into the room, and so much so that, we have advisories, we have clubs, we're doing so much around the tech, and then teaching them how to use the tech to do the things that they want to do. They don't have to get into tech fields, but technology is everywhere. But I do think, as a panel, and probably we owe the women an apology because this is real. When I look at this here, I'm like, we ought to do better. And we will do better. And we will do better.
Right, can I offer something?
Sure.
So, my give back to you. So we lift up, we lift up mentors, right? But I think sometimes the semantics gets in the way. We have to also lift up femtors, right? And I would offer anyone who's interested, so at Staten Island Tech, you've heard of Scratch, the programming language we use for coding. So a young lady from Staten Island Tech, Tammy Stern, graduated year 2000, helped co-create Scratch with Dr. Resnick at MIT. And 20% of all Google employees' time could be spent giving back to school or doing something that they want to do. So if you would like, I would be more than happy to connect any one of you to the femtors of Google who are responsible for some of the most cutting-edge technology. We need to get them in front of our students. So I'd be more than happy to help make that happen.
I see so many questions, but I think we have to.
Yeah.
Come on up. Thanks, everybody. Please give him a round of applause.